Well, hi guys, I'm Emily, so I'm phase 1 DVM at OVC. I did quite a few things to prepare for both the CASPer and the VPI. I'm going to try and go through them as fast as I can because I did do quite a wide range of things, but I just want to emphasize that I don't think that all of this is necessary to be successful throughout your application process. This is kind of just what I did and what I thought worked best for me. Some of these things weren't the best for me, but I did try them anyway just to make sure I felt like I did all I could to prepare. So the first thing that I did when I found out I got an interview was I started preparing right away. So I think I got my interview invitation on the 3rd of May, and the next day is kind of when I already started thinking about what I could do to prepare. So that was, I bought a BMO book off of Amazon. So I found that kind of just introduced me to the concept of CASPer. I've never heard of CASPer prior to the interview, so I was very freaked out by it and by everything that it contained. So reading through that, it gives you like a bit of an introduction to the scenarios that you might be faced with, or potential questions they might ask about you or your experience or how you would handle a certain situation. So I found that really helpful. It has both answers that professionals have put together themselves, and it also gives you some empty questions at the back of the book, so you can practice kind of going through your way or your method of answering those questions as well. Another thing that I did was something called the Astrov CASPer course. So this was something that I found was like one of the most useful things that I did to prepare. What it is basically you do like a course about what CASPer is about, ethics, and you learn a little bit about ethical scenarios and related to veterinary medicine kind of just in general. And then they give you simulation tests. So it's basically like you're writing the CASPer, but it's through a different company, and it's got the same time limits. It's got the same kind of questions, and then someone actually goes through afterwards and scores that test for you. Now these people are, I think, medical students that did CASPer and excelled and were high scorers. So I found that really useful because not only did they score it, but they told me things that I did well and things that I needed to like work more on. So I kind of had better time management in working on the things that I needed to do better at for the CASPer. So I'm just reading a list here. So I also looked at the CASPer website. They kind of go over everything that CASPer includes, and they do offer, I think there's some questions at the bottom. I don't remember. I don't know if anyone else remembers, but another thing I did was typing speed. So this is like a key one. CASPer, you have 5 minutes to answer 3 questions per scenario. It sounds like it's very short, but honestly, if you have like a very fast typing speed, it might save your life. I think my words per minute was, I think, 70 to 75 by the time I wrote the CASPer. I know they only say that like a words per minute of like 40 something is recommended, but the more you get down, the more likely you're gonna get a better score. So I just found that doing like a typing test 1 or 2 times a day kind of just kept me on track for that. And then other than that, I kind of just did YouTube videos, and then I worked on scenarios on my own time, stuff like that. If I was too tired to type, I would just watch a YouTube video and kind of put it in the background. So I was still studying in a way. And then, yeah, that's kind of what I did for the CASPer. So like I said, not all of that you have to do, but I found that it worked for me, and it left me feeling very prepared on the time of the actual CASPer since I knew what I was about to look at when I pressed start on the test. So I guess moving on to the VPI. So what I did for that was I worked through my BIF slowly, kind of like a resume, and I just typed or talked out loud about that experience, what I kind of learned from it, what I found was a challenge in that occupation or volunteering role or something like that, and what I thought my strengths were as a person in that organization or what have you. It kind of helps you prepare for any question they might ask about your experience because they are asking about you and you know you best. So I also used other people as interviewers. So people that make you uncomfortable or speaking in front of, like, say, your boyfriend or your mom. If you get kind of uncomfortable talking about yourself to those people, that's a good thing. You want that to happen because I find that it like gets you more ready to be uncomfortable, if that makes sense, kind of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And recording yourself is also another one too, because you can see if you're kind of moving around too much or seeming nervous, and you kind of catch little things that you might not have realized you were doing. I know when I'm nervous, I always go like this. So it's something that I didn't want to practice at the time of my actual interview. So I'm recording myself and kind of making fun of myself as I went. It can be cringy, but it helps you in the end. So I highly recommend that. Other than that, I kind of just looked online for other questions that previous vet school interviews had. It does help you kind of get a better understanding of what you might be asked. And then, yeah, I kind of just brainstormed questions for myself. So that kind of left me feeling pretty prepared for the interview. On the actual day of the VPI, I was calm, and that never happens. So I just think that preparing early from the get-go is kind of what helped me feel the most confident. I'm always usually a nervous interviewer, but I wore something I felt confident in. I wore a nice blazer. I kept my hair out of my face, and I kind of just smiled, and I was myself. So I think in the end, just being yourself and knowing yourself inside and out is really what the key thing is. So I know you all can do it. I believe in you all. So I hope to see you in vet school next year or in the year after. And I wish you guys all the best of luck. I hope that was helpful, although I kind of rambled a bit, but whoever's next, feel free to go.
All right, I'll go next because I'm next alphabetical. I'll just say hi, my name's Hannah. I'll tell you a bit about myself. I also did my undergrad at Guelph and I did animal biology, like I'm sure probably most of you are in. I finished my undergrad before I applied, so this was my first try, but I did do all 4 years of my undergrad. And so Emily and I think, had like a lot of similar test prep. I found out that I got an interview, which was super exciting, but I was also working full time, like 40-hour weeks. And I had coincidentally adopted a dog like a week before that. So I was very busy that week when I found out I got an interview, which was very exciting, but it also made test prep like kind of a balance. Like I had to balance like working as well as prepping for CASPer and the VPIs. So the first thing I did when I got an interview, like Emily, I didn't really know anything about CASPer. So I went on the CASPer website and there's like a list of like 10 or 12 qualities that CASPer looks for and is testing on. And I kind of just like looked at those qualities and just took the time to think about situations where I demonstrated each of those qualities because like, as you guys will find out when you start studying, there are some questions that ask you for like personal experiences as well. So I found having those in my back pocket and having like an experience readily prepared was super helpful so that when I got to those questions, I was ready to just like type those ones out as fast as I could. I also use BMO. I didn't buy the book, but the YouTube videos are super helpful. There's like, I watched like probably every YouTube video they did on CASPer. There's lots of different scenario ones. So I always like read through the scenario, tried to do it on my own, then saw how they would answer it. You kind of have to take it with a grain of salt though, because like Emily said, you only get 5 minutes to answer 3 questions and the BMO responses are like paragraphs and paragraphs. So when I saw those, I was stressed. I was like, I'm never going to be able to type that much on my CASPer. Don't worry, like you're not going to be able to type that much. Just like make sure you get out the main points, and that's what's important. And yeah, in regards to that, typing speed is also important. I did typing tests like constantly for the 2 weeks that I could. Like that was a lot of my prep, was just making sure I could increase my typing speed. And on that note, also learning to forget typos. I have a thing where I'm in lectures and if I make a typo, I will go back and fix that typo. But when you're writing CASPer, you don't have time to do that. And as long as every word isn't a typo, like it's okay. You might not know yet, but basically there's a different evaluator for every single question. So if you make a lot of typos on like multiple questions, they're never going to like see that pattern because there's a different person marking each one. So I kind of had to learn that even if I was making typos, just keep going, keep getting out the words. So that was one tip I have. Yeah, so I did a lot of practice questions from BMO. There's also something called, I think it's called Prep Match, which basically like spits out CASPer-like questions, and you can practice like timed versions of it. So you can like choose to do 12 at one time, or you can do like one at a time kind of thing. So I did lots of those as well. And it also lets you mark other people's, and other people's can mark yours based on like how well you did. So you get some feedback, which is really nice. Another thing for CASPer is that because like different markers are marking every single question, they're not going to see like if you use the same like structure for like your answers. So I basically like looked through the questions I was being asked, and like you can kind of see a pattern in what they're looking for, and BMO like goes through it. But you can like basically have like a first sentence that you would use for almost like every question. And I was able to like memorize a sentence and be like, this is kind of where I'm going to start, and always have that sentence like ready to go. And then, so the day before my CASPer test, on like the CASPer website, they actually give you like a run through CASPer test that you can do. So the day before my test, I did like that run through test and kind of like put myself in the situation, which I thought was like a really good prep as well. All right. And then for the BPIs, like Emily, I think we like did a lot of the same thing for that. Just know your BIF super well. Say things that you were like comfortable doing and things that like made you like who you are today. Know like your key takeaways from each event or everything that you write down, because those are what are really important. In terms of like the day of the interview, one tip I would have is that like I have a problem where if someone asks me a question and I'm nervous, I'll kind of forget what that question is. So like one thing I would say is if you have a piece of paper with you on the day of the interview and someone asks you a question, you can kind of like make a mental note of like, oh, why or what or who, like so that you know like if you get lost along the way of your answer, you can kind of just be like, oh, right, that's what they want me to do. So I can get back to the main point. And one thing for me is I'm a nervous swiveler. So if I'm on a swivel chair, I will just like rock back and forth. So the day of my interview, no swivel chair, had to be like on a dining room table. So kind of just knowing those little things about yourself that can make your interview go smoother is definitely something I would do. But yeah, good luck to everyone. And I was in your same like seat last year. Like I was watching this talk, and here I am this year. So everyone can do it. Believe in yourselves. You got this.
Okay, I guess I'm next. So, hi guys, my name's Caitlin, and I did graduate from the biomedical science program at the University of Guelph. So, as a background about me, I'm naturally a pretty introverted person, and public speaking doesn't come naturally to me. So, in preparation for the interview, I was very anxious and stressed for it. But believe me, if I can get through it, I'm sure all of you guys can get through it as well. So I also applied to OVC twice. And on the first time I applied in 2020, I didn't get an interview and I didn't get accepted. And then in the most recent cycle, I did get an interview and was ultimately admitted. So I also did use the BMO book in preparation for the CASPer. So the BMO book, I didn't read it front to back, but what I found useful in the book was the last ending part of it, where they focus on sample CASPer questions and answers. I found that was really useful as a starting point because I didn't know what CASPer was or what kind of answers they were expecting of me. So it was a very good starting point to set expectations for myself and how to form different perspectives and answers to go from there. For CASPer, I did also use a service called Future Me MD, where they provide different counselors to help you prepare for CASPer as well as the interview. So I did get a counselor to help me prepare for CASPer, and they helped me provide real-time feedback on my answers. And they did time me, and it was all compiled into a Google Doc. So it was good for me to go back and reference later on when the CASPer did eventually come. I also use a second source called CASPerfect. So what CASPerfect is a simulation of the CASPer test, but instead it's all written scenarios instead of a video scenario. So they time you for the 12 scenarios, you write down your answers, and then they evaluate it and give you feedback embedded in your answers to tell you where to improve and what you could have added. So I found that a very useful tool. The only downside to it was that it was written scenarios opposed to a video scenario. So that did take away the video aspect. But if you're able to picture what video is playing in the written scenario, then that's really helpful. So moving on to the interview, I found sitting down with a past OVC student really helpful in the interview process because she was able to give me good pointers on how to do well and provide me with real-time feedback on my responses. She also was able to tell me how I come off on camera because sometimes it's hard to tell how you view yourself and what kind of emotions you're portraying through the camera. And also for the interview, I focused on not memorizing my BIF front to back, but I focused on some of the main experiences that would set me apart from everybody else. And I would try to come up with as many different stories as I can for each of my experience. So whether it was a positive experience, a negative experience, a challenge that I've overcome, or a conflict that I had with a coworker or my boss, or any major lessons I've learned from my experiences is what I focus my stories around. And my stories is pretty much what made up the bulk of my interview answers. So not only did it highlight my experience, but it showed how I grew as a person, what I've learned, and ultimately how that will make me a better vet. And I think that's probably what set me apart from a lot of the other applicants, because ultimately the interviewer is here to get to know you and who you are as a person. They're not here to judge you or scare you or be intimidating, although it may seem a bit intimidating. It just treat it like a conversation and tell them stories about yourself that makes you unique and what sets you apart from the other applicants. So going into the interview, I thought that I was way over prepared. I thought I came up with a bajillion stories that I will never need to use. But ultimately, when it came time for the interview, I ended up using every single story that I prepared for. So definitely be over prepared than under prepared for the interview. And I also found that filming yourself on a photo booth was really helpful because it showed you how you came off on camera, the emotions that you were portraying. Because I found that every time when I would say how passionate I am about veterinary medicine, I would look completely dead and have no emotion behind it. And that's the trick with the virtual personal interview, is that a lot of things can get lost in translation because there is that physical barrier between you and the interviewer. Not being able to see the person like in real life is a challenge, and being able to over exaggerate your emotions to get that across the camera is really crucial and important. So moving on to the day of my interview, I think I was one of the first people on the first day of the interview cycle. So I was kind of stressed and anxious about that, but just remember to stay calm and try to just remember like the 3 to 5 experiences from your BIF that you would really want to highlight and get across to the interviewer. Just keep that in the back of your mind, and then any chance you get it in the interview, try to bring that up, because you're not going to get to go through every single point on your BIF. You're only going to be able to focus on a handful or a few of them. So being able to focus on those ones that sets you apart and that you're able to highlight the best stories in, I would focus on that on the day of your interview. And ultimately, just remember to be yourself, because the interviewers are just there to get to know you and treat it like a conversation. After the interview, I felt really anxious and stressed still, and I was worried about whether I answered the questions that they asked me properly or not. But just remember to relax, and that everything you worked for is now out there on the table and you put your best foot forward. So just try to keep that in mind, and that try to look forward to something to do after the interview. So try to make plans with friends, go and watch a movie, just try to do anything you can to get your mind off of the interview, because those 2 to 3 weeks while waiting for the results will be the longest 2 to 3 weeks of your life. But in conclusion, I hope you guys got some tips or advice that you hopefully can use during your practice or preparation for the CASPer and interview. And I wish you guys all the best of luck. I'm sure you guys will all do great.
All right, those are some pretty good tips so far, and I have a lot of similar ones. So I'll try and throw in some unique ones that maybe haven't been mentioned as well. When just thinking about my interview prep, because I went through the CASPer OVC interview cycle twice. I like to kind of compare it for reference, as I obviously didn't get admitted the first time around. So just for reference, when CASPer was initially included in the application process, it was announced fairly late, just because of the nature of COVID and everything. So it felt like there was only about a month or so for all the applicants to get to know CASPer and really cram in that prep. And when comparing it to the 2021 application cycle, the biggest difference for me was when I started. So because I was working full time, I had graduated from undergrad and just stayed in Guelph to work and prepare for the interview I was anticipating. I started actually closer to like January, which seems pretty early, but my reason for that was because instead of cramming like 8 hours of interview prep, like 4 weeks prior to my interview, I really needed that gradual ongoing practice. So I started with like a session a week with different resources such as the Future Me MD one. And I really like this one because they have not only med school consultants, but as you would see with Astrov, but also DVM students. So it's really comforting to kind of get these unique perspectives, as they're both professional schools and you get advice you haven't heard before. So I went out of my way to ensure I was booked with different consultants, as it's great to build a rapport and maybe have more sessions with certain people you're comfortable with. But sometimes when you only book with one person, there can be some bias there, as they get to know who you are and see how hard you're working, which is common with all the applicants you're kind of competing with, but which just give me more reason to book with a variety of people. So I found that helpful as well. When it came to the time when the interviews were announced, that's when I would increase my practice. So it would be a handful of times a week or even daily. And at that point, I already had a handful of sessions under my belt. So it just took a lot of stress off because it didn't feel so sudden. And just knowing how you work as a person, maybe that will work for you, or maybe you prefer like the last minute pressure, or you might have school instead. So you might not be able to start that early, but it's just something to consider. As I said, everyone's different. When it came to recording myself, everyone would always say, like, record yourself, like, watch your mannerisms and stuff, but it didn't work for me. I was always very distracted by just, like, literally recording myself. So here's proof that you don't have to necessarily use that technique to get admitted. Again, just knowing yourself best. Let me see here. I also have a list. When it came to looking at the qualities we mentioned that CASPer kind of looks for on their assessment, I would take experiences from my BIF and I would make stories relating to each of those qualities. And sometimes I would use the same example for a variety of qualities, so then you don't necessarily have to remember as many, or if you get nervous or under pressure during the exam, or even in like the virtual BIF interview, you then kind of have a familiar number of stories under your belt if you do kind of freeze or kind of get overwhelmed in the moment, which I found comforting because it just takes, the more pressure you can take off yourself, I find it just makes the whole thing a lot easier. And with that being said, I didn't only look at my own experiences, but I would look at different news stories and I would look at debate websites and I would see different perspectives on different controversial topics. And then I would kind of empathize and look at both perspectives, even though we all typically have our side. It's good to kind of take the neutral perspective, see both angles, and then see how you can justify how you feel and why, while still respecting the other side. Because as a vet, again, when you're encountering a lot of difficult situations, this is kind of the role you have to play as a professional. So it's not only helping you practice for the test, but also just good qualities to have down the road. Let's see here. And something I think that was a big difference for me with the previous interview cycle was just within myself, I lacked confidence. So since I had the opportunity to work since I wasn't studying, I threw myself into a veterinary reception job to kind of overcome anxiety and apprehension to customer service and answering the phone. Initially, on my first few days of work, I would envy the phone and really stress out about it, but I knew these were people skills I needed to overcome. So to kind of challenge myself and put yourself in a new situation to feel that discomfort, like Emily mentioned, just getting used to being uncomfortable and learning how to learn and grow from that can also just help you with self-confidence in the interview setting itself. And one very key thing I would like to add is throughout the process, it is a lot. Even now in this meeting, you might feel kind of pressured and overwhelmed by the thought of the interview process and the application process, but you will experience moments of doubt. And I think it's important to realize you're putting all this effort and all this hard work, and even in this meeting today, because vet school means so much to you. And even though it is not the easiest path to take, just taking moments to sit and think of why you want to be a vet, or moments in your experiences that really sparked that fire inside you, just kind of grounding yourself and remembering what's the purpose of all this, can really be a great motivator when you're kind of being hard on yourself, because I think that's the nature of most of us here, and it's important to be kinder to yourself to kind of have a better optimistic mindset going into the ongoing process. So I'll stop there.
Thank you guys so much. That was absolutely incredible to hear from all of you. And it's interesting that like so many of them of your preparation styles were similar, but at the end of the day, like there were all these different unique things that you guys did. And I feel like that really just kind of conveys to everybody that you got to just go with what works for you. And there's no right way to do things, except maybe get the BMO book. I feel like everyone kind of said they did that. But I'm just kidding. We don't formally endorse BMO. But yeah, so I feel like we're good to kind of dive into some questions. So we have a couple if, you know, the chat starts out a little slow, but we'd love to hear from our members. So if you guys have any questions for anyone in particular, or just for, you know, everybody as a whole, and then OVC students, if you guys want to just like raise your little hand and like Noam will call on you then. Yeah.
So we have a question from Veronica who asks, do you have any tips for the BIF? Let's go with Nicole.
When it comes to the BIF, I think it's important to just really go through all of them and maybe make them unique from each other, as sometimes descriptors can be similar if they are similar experiences, like working with animals, cleaning up after them. But the BIF is really an opportunity not only to show that you're a promising candidate, but also it's a tool to use in the interview. So when making the BIF, also think about how it can help you down the line in the interview itself, and just take the time to have lots of people review it and give you some feedback and edit it. I also actually use the writing services at the university just to get a neutral, like someone that studies English or something like that, just for grammatical things, like just to really polish it up. Because again, I think the more perspectives, the better, as the more eyes on your BIF, the more confident you'll feel in submitting it as well.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you, Nicole. Let's go Emily, Hannah, then Caitlin.
Okay, I just have to put my hand down here, sorry. So I have two like points I would make. One would try to be concise with your BIF, like you want it to look very, for lack of better words, pretty when someone opens it and reads it. I know it's just a piece of black and white paper with your experiences listed and such, but when it comes down to it, if you know that one experience, say you worked at a clinic and you got like some experience working with a vet, and then sometimes you were just doing veterinary reception, or sometimes you were just a volunteer and it was unpaid. I know that that is 3 different types of experience, but what I would do is I would take where I got the most experience at that clinic and put it under either vet, volunteer, or sorry, the other one was extracurricular, I think. I'm not sure what it was, but I found that even though I did a little bit of everything at some jobs, it reads better to someone who's looking at it as just one experience. And then at the time of your VPI, you can say, oh, but I also did like A, B, and C here as well. And I thought that this did this for me because yada, yada. But another thing for the BIF, I would make sure that every experience that you're putting down, be confident that if someone were to give those people a phone call, that they would only have something positive to say about you. I'm not saying that you guys are negative people or you're bad at your jobs or anything like that, but for me, I'm an anxious person about things like that. I get in my head and I think that people are going to say things that have never happened and that are not real. I think that's just a product of my stress, but I texted every validator for every experience I had, called, emailed, and I said, would you be willing, if OVC called you, would you be willing to speak positively on my behalf and support me and make sure that what I did is true? Like, and I showed them what I was going to put on everything. So just making sure that every single person you're putting down on paper will only have positive things to say about you. I'm sure they do. But yeah, that's 2 tips that I have for the BIF.
All right. And yeah, so kind of going off what Emily was saying, when you're writing down your experiences and describing like tasks that you do, one tip I would have is describe things that you know that like you are comfortable with and you're confident explaining. If you are ever asked to like explain like what you did, like make sure you know like what you're doing and it's not like just like say you did like a jugular once or something like that. Like make sure you like know what you're doing when you put it down. I'll also talk about like the essay questions because I don't know if anyone's talked about that yet. I found one thing when I was writing the essay questions is to try to like keep like a little bit of a theme going throughout, like whether it's like the human animal connection or something that you're passionate about. It's nice if you can look at all 3 questions and see that they all have like a tie into each other. I think that makes it like look really polished and kind of like gives a better picture of yourself as a person and as the kind of vet that you want to be.
Yeah, so for the BIF essays, I do think like having a cohesive theme for all 3 questions is really useful. I also think for like the more general BIF questions, I think it was about like what do vets contribute to society? So try to think in broad terms of how vets contribute to society because honestly, they contribute in many, many different ways. So be creative with that question and trust me, it'll be good. And then for your experiences, for me, I found that it was difficult when I had like 3 different veterinary clinic experiences and how to differentiate what I learned at each experience. So try to sit down and really like reflect on each experience and how they were unique from one another. And that's what I focus on in the description sections of my BIF is how each clinic is unique and what I've learned from each one.
Thank you, everyone. Those were some lovely answers. And just want to double check, or not double, like triple check. Elizabeth, there's only one question for the BIF this year, correct?
You mean the personal statement?
Yes.
Yeah, there's only one.
Okay, yeah. Just triple checking. Thank you for letting me know. Did not want to scare our members a little bit there. But yeah, for our members, if you have any more questions, feel free to type them in the chat. If not, we'll give you all some questions very soon.
A random point I just want to make, I forgot to mention it when I was talking, was for decompressing. I know that was something that you guys wanted us to kind of talk about. Decompressing was hard for me. I'm naturally, as I'm sure some of you guys are as well, type A, so I'm wound very, very tightly when it comes to things like this, and I don't let go of things very easily. So not knowing was something that probably after the VPI, I cried. I'm not gonna lie. Like when I shut the computer, all I did was just like cry because I just thought it went horribly. Same with the CASPer. I thought CASPer went even worse. Like I didn't want to think about CASPer after it finished. I went to bed. I think it was at 7 p.m. anyway, so it finished at like 9 or something like that, and then I just went to bed crying. So it's okay to cry, like let it out. It's okay. That's just the way that I let my stress out. But I just think that like it's important to like acknowledge your emotions and like you're allowed to be angry that it didn't go the way that you wanted it to go. Things work out for a reason, and obviously crying got me somewhere. So I'm not saying use that as a technique. I'm just you're allowed to let it out is kind of where I was going with that. And it does actually help you feel better. So
Thank you for that, Emily. That was really that was good to hear. That was really good to hear. Nicole, you have something to say?
Yes, something I forgot to mention as well. When it comes to CASPer, time management is really important because, again, you're only given 5 minutes to answer 3 questions. So a technique that I learned aside from increasing typing speed was to kind of watch the clock. It's really important to kind of keep yourself in check. Like maybe at the 2-minute mark, it's time to move to the question 2, or at like this time, I should move to question 3, because since one person is marking all 3 questions, leaving some blank can really be detrimental to your score. So something that I think is really important is to try and write something for everything and try and get equal text for each section, as that will set you up for success within itself.
Awesome tips. Hannah, you also have something to add?
Yeah, I just heard what Emily said, and I feel like I should add something too, because I had like a similar experience post-interview, like stress as well. After I did my VPI, like mid-interview, I forgot one of the questions, and I was like, this is it, like this is the end. But like here we are now, like try to like cut yourself some slack, because I was also like really upset after that interview, and I was like, oh no, like it went horribly. So I kind of had like a little rant to a friend or my mom, and then I was like, okay, just got to move on. Like you did as best as you could, and you know, like you put your best foot forward, like Caitlin said, and you, if everything works out, like it'll pay off in the end. So I just feel like that's important to say, and thanks, Emily, for adding that on.
Awesome. Thank you for that, guys. That was really, really good to hear. And like also like just speaking from my like personal experiences, like it is hard for me to let things go when I don't understand like why something happened. So hearing that was like just really good to hear, and kind of makes me feel pretty better about how I'm likely going to feel after writing. But Tula, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions from the members, so I just have one that's a little bit more general since we were just on the BIF discussion. But I know at least the way that I have access to the BIF, it's kind of like, it's just a Word document that you download and can type in, at least for me. I don't know if that was different because I'm an international student. But in case anyone comes across similar questions that I have while I've been kind of working on it, is you guys were kind of emphasizing that it should like kind of look nice, but it doesn't look the best when you kind of like type right into it. Did you guys like just type into it, or did you print it and then write?
So ours, I think, are all of us undergrad from Guelph. Okay, yeah. So we got it through like the Guelph portal on WebAdvisor. So it looked kind of like a PDF, and we could like just type right on that portal. So it was already like pre-organized. We just kind of had to add our experiences in. So yeah, I didn't know they had that for international students. Sorry. I don't know, Elizabeth, do you know if there's a way to make it look nice, or is it just different for international students?
Sorry, I was busy doing something else. Ask me the question again.
So for international applicants, they like download, I guess they download a Word document for their BIF versus us entering it like on the WebAdvisor.
No, it's online, kind of like ours. It's on oh, are you talking about the ones at the University of Guelph, or the ones that are applying? Yeah, okay. So Tula, you could probably talk to that. I think it's the same. I'm not sure. Have you submitted your BIF already?
No, actually, I was the one who originally opened the question because I figured if I'm not the only one, like kind of a little bit confused, because I was just sent like an email with the BIF as a Word document attached and then kind of didn't load. But I know that like I just got a portal account opened today and it's a little busy rushing around, so I didn't quite get a chance to look in there yet.
Yeah,
Also,
good question. I would think it's like the same thing as the one that the Canadians fill in, but word. And then the ones that are applying from like on the online system, you can apply through VimCast if you're not Canadian, and that's like an online system very similar. They have different categories for some of the experiences. Like they have, I think, one called community involvement instead of volunteering, and they have research. They have a whole category called research, which we don't have, but you can put that in your extracurricular stuff. Yeah.
I know that Future Me MD, I think both Nicole and I are both on it as well. And there's this like a thing that you can go through where like you can actually, if you're comfortable, send your BIF to those people and they can actually help you like organize it and think of ways to approach your experiences. Like, cause you have like, I think it's like a sentence that you can put under each experience. Like it doesn't give you, like it actually cuts you off. You can't type anymore. So it kind of helps you summarize your experiences in a sentence as well. I know that I went through Future Me MD as well, and I spoke with Sarah Belair. She's in phase 2 at OVC. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Sarah, but she's awesome, and she kind of helped me with that. So I highly recommend, even if honestly I'm promoting her, she's awesome. So she's a great aid, and she's like so willing to help. I know all of us, like if you reach out to any of us, we'd all be happy to help you as much as we can, given everything that we all have going on. But yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to like any student. It doesn't matter who it is. Like I'm sure absolutely anybody at OVC would be more than willing to help you with any of that stuff. So send us an email or Facebook message, whatever you prefer, Snapchat.
Before we go on, Nicole, thank you for saying that, Emily. We really appreciate that. That's like awesome. But funny enough, Sarah was on this event last year as one of the top achievers in the MMI when she was in phase 1. So we already kind of got introduced a little bit to how amazing she is. But yes, she is very awesome. Nicole.
Yeah, I just wanted to add with respect to preparing for the day itself, I found like setting up my laptop with the right lighting, the height and everything, and kind of having a clean space down to the detail of what chair I wanted to use and everything like that got rid of a lot of stress for me, just because that morning I just had to wake up, my space was set up. I just had to literally focus on, this might be TMI, but like having breakfast and going on a walk, just to kind of really keep a positive mindset to ensure my performance was the best it was going to be after all that hard work and preparation. And then I think all I did was really have a quick call with like a family member to make sure the setup looked good on Microsoft Teams and my audio was working and such for the BIF interview. So again, just like knowing yourself best and doing everything you can to relieve the stress or any risk that will kind of be a pestering anxiety in the back of your mind is the best thing to do, just to keep yourself calm.
Funny enough, I know that. I guess you guys met Maria last year too. I remember being there and watching Maria. Maria's one of my good friends, and she said that at the day of her interview, I think her computer wasn't working, so she had to go on her phone for the interview. So honestly, things can come up and they might happen. Not saying they will, but don't stress. Like the interviewers, just join the Teams meeting back and apologize and say what happened. It happens. It's life. Like it's part of the online learning process too. So I know that like after Maria finished her interview, she was really worried because she was using her phone, but she still just was herself, and it really paid off for her. So technical difficulties are a thing. We all know this. So it's natural to be taken off guard by it. But as long as you kind of just know that it's going to happen, everything should be okay, I think.
That's really good to know, because my Wi-Fi has been cutting out for the past week, and I've just like had fever dreams about like, oh, what if I go to like the OVC interview and it's just like pops right in the middle. But that makes me feel a lot better. I just wanted to remind our members, chat's still open. You're still able to ask any question you'd like to our wonderful achievers here. And if not, in like the next like 30 seconds-ish, we'll go on to another question.
Also, if you guys want to like turn your mics and cameras on to ask a question, feel free. That's just like the only reason you wouldn't is if you weren't comfortable being recorded or you just didn't feel like it, but that's totally an option as well if you'd rather have more of a face-to-face interaction, because I know those are lacking a little bit nowadays. So yeah. I guess while we don't have any questions coming in the chat, I just had a quick question for Hannah specifically. I know you said that you took like a piece of paper and like a pencil into your interview to write down little notes. Is there anything that says like anything about writing down notes, or do you think it like kind of how did you go about that?
I didn't have a problem with it. I literally just had like one like scrap little sticky note and a pencil, and it wasn't like writing notes about like what like the question was or something. It was just more of like a mental jot note. So like if someone was asking me a question that was a why something or a what something, just like kind of like a question mark or like a who or something like that, just so that like if you like are going through half the question, especially when nerves kick in, at least I like can have this problem. When I start talking, I'll be like, oh my goodness, like what was the question at the beginning? So just being able to write like that little like one word thing to kind of like give yourself a mental reminder before you like compose yourself and then answer the question. I think that's like a really helpful tip to kind of get you on the right track and make sure that you don't forget the question halfway, which, you know, it happens.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a pretty good question or a pretty good strategy.
Thank you, Hannah. Before, Elizabeth, if you're still here, before you go, there's just a question that I know you'd love to answer. So, Sung Hee Park, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that in any way, asks how many hours of experience is recommended for vet school?
Yeah, we don't have a set number of hours. So I mean, you have to think about why we ask people to get veterinary experience in the first place. And that's because we want you to been there, done that kind of thing before you apply to make sure this is really what you want to do and to understand what the profession is about. So the only way you can do that is to see it up close and personal, you know, have tried it. We like it if you try a couple of workplaces just because veterinary medicine is different, you know, from clinic to clinic, and we like you to try to work with different species. But that's because you're going to work with different species as soon as you get here, right? Like you guys have already started your horse stuff. And, you know, if you've never touched a horse, okay, students, raise your hand if you never touched a horse before. Look at that. So every single student came into the program here that at least had a little bit of horse experience. And it's good to have that. It's not necessary, but you know, it does help a little bit because you're not as uncomfortable or unsure when you have to do it in person. So it's really for you, the experience, both the vet and the animal experience. It's really all about you really being sure this is the right profession for you. And then, you know, the extracurricular stuff's important too, because so much of veterinary medicine is about working with people, right? And if you haven't been part of group work or have done anything with other people, like sports even, it's going to be a little harder to kind of get that done, or you might be less comfortable. So all good things to do. Don't I mean, you don't have to go crazy getting all these hours if it means your mental health is going to suffer, but get at least some, right? And you know, if you're in a big city like Toronto, it's harder to get that food animal experience or horse experience. So you know, mix it up with the small animals, get exotics, get emergency medicine. Toronto has some amazing emergency medicine clinics. There's also the Toronto Wildlife Rehab that's really good. Did you guys talk about what you volunteered, what you did as volunteer work before you got here? No? Why don't you guys do that? Like, why don't you just quickly say what kind of animals you worked with and where you did it? And I gotta go. I'm sorry, everybody.
No worries, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
I'm gonna open up my BIF and just kind of go through it. I forget everything that I did. if anyone knows first, go ahead.
I was just quickly going to mention that I actually had not had official horse experience prior to getting admitted, but I did have dairy cow experience. So I think, like everyone has said, it's not necessary to have large animal experience, but if you feel more comfortable with kind of stepping out of your comfort zone and exposing yourself to something you hadn't had before, I think that is helpful because, again, it just gives you more confidence, and in a way you're exposing yourself to something you might like more than you thought. Like coming from Toronto, I didn't think I was going to enjoy being around cows or doing barn chores, but it was a delight, to be honest. And having our first large animal lab, being around cows and working with them before, it was just a lot less intimidating.
I can go through kind of what I did here. So volunteering or animal experience in general, I worked at an equine reproductive barn. I milked cows for 1.5 years, which I had no like farm experience before I got this job, and now I'm going to specialize in dairy reproductive medicine. So like the cows changed my life, and I highly recommend working with cows. I milked every day these cows, like 180 cows, in like 4 or 5 hours, and it was the best job I've ever had. I got to help with like calving, and working with a veterinarian and stuff like that, and now that's what I want to do for a living. So honestly, like it really does help to go and get like crazy different experience, because you never know, like that could be in what you want to do for the rest of your life, and it takes doing it to find it. So highly recommend. I also did like another racehorse stable, so I helped with foaling and stuff like that. And then for volunteering, I was a camp counselor for a long time, so I put that down. And then I put like competitive dance under extracurricular. If you do any sports, put that down, because teamwork is like a major component of vet med. So highlighting experiences that show that is great. And then I did things like outreach trip, mission trip. So I went to Chile, and I helped build a school with my class in grade 12. And then I went to various like leadership conferences in high school and stuff like that. So even if it's in high school and you're graduating your undergraduate degree, it's still experience, and it still shaped you to be the person that you are today. So don't worry about like the gap between your experiences, or like how many years it's been since you did like a leadership conference, because it all, like I said, shapes you into the person that you are today. So that's kind of what I did. Other than that, it was just like clinic experience. And I forget who it was that mentioned veterinary reception. Nicole, I think it was you, right? Veterinary reception, like that job taught me so much in such a small time. Like I highly recommend, if you've never had a veterinary reception job, like please just go try. And it, like, I never used to like speaking to people that I didn't know, and I didn't like picking up a phone. Like I was terrified to talk to people about things that went wrong, or medications, or listening to people yell at me. They're going to yell at you, I'm sorry. But it does help you really learn how to deal with conflict too. Like I worked at a veterinary emergency hospital, and sometimes we'd have 8 to 10 hour waits, and people would call because their pets had been there for 5 hours and they were still waiting, and kind of dealing with stuff like that. Like it's uncomfortable, but I learned so much as a veterinary receptionist, so I highly recommend that job.
Yeah, I have my bit here, so I can go through mine next. So my primary experience was in a small animal clinic. It was a small animal clinic that cross-trained, so I had like equal amounts front desk reception versus like actually assisting in surgeries and appointments and stuff like that. And like Emily and Nicole were saying, veterinary reception is an amazing job to just learn how to interact with people. And even if it's not in a veterinary setting, I highly recommend working some kind of customer service job. Like even if you're serving at a restaurant, like I used to serve at a restaurant, or working customer service at Canadian Tire was like one of my first jobs. And those jobs that where you're working customer service and having to deal with disgruntled people and having to like kind of manage conflict and that kind of thing will teach you so much about how to like hold a conversation and be able to just like talk to someone openly or manage like an upset person. And I think that's super valuable and going to be really helpful in interviews as well. So besides that, I am a little bit of a horse girl. It's low key, but I did some horse specialty clinics where I volunteered. I also work at OVC in the large animal wards as a neonatal foal assistant. I started in the Foal Watch program, which some of you may have heard of or helped out with, which may or may not be around anymore. But that gave me a lot of large animal specialty experience, which was amazing. One thing that I should know for anyone interested in small animal medicine is you can't have like owning a dog on your BIF or something like that. So it's important for you guys, if you want to do like small or something like that and show that experience, to kind of go out there and either like volunteer at a shelter or do the College Royal if it comes back or something like that, because that will be able to like put on your BIF. One thing I did was I fostered dogs with Niagara Dog Rescue. If anyone is interested in ever fostering, I have a lot of connections. I'm super happy to kind of chat with you about my fostering experience. And if you want to foster, you're welcome to reach out to me and I will set you up with the people you need to talk to, because that experience like gave me so many hours on my BIF, and it also just taught me a lot about rescue dogs and shelter medicine, which was amazing. So like extracurricular, what else do I have here? Yeah, serving. I worked on like in the school board. I volunteered in classrooms, and then I also played soccer like all throughout high school and parts of university. So that was on my BIF as well. But yeah, if anyone has any questions about experiences or anything like that, they're welcome to ask as well.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. So I volunteered at 2 different veterinary clinics and worked in another veterinary clinic. So in total, I had 3 different clinic experiences, all with small animals, so dogs and cats. But I think what set it apart was that each clinic had a different way of operating and running their clinic, which was really interesting and something that I could talk about during the interview and the BIF. I also had experience in my undergrad working at the Institute for Comparative Cancer Investigation at the Ontario Veterinary College. So that was interesting because I got insight on like the clinical trials at the oncology department at OVC. And I also helped at the companion animal tumor sample bank. So what they did was they like got the cancer tumors and they would cut them off, and then like we would sample them and we would keep them in the freezer. So if anybody wanted to like test or do research on a specific cancer type, we would have that bank for them. So that was a pretty interesting opportunity. And then I also had some large animal experience in my undergrad. So I did Foal Watch as well as College Royal. So that was my first interaction and only interaction with large animals. So that was really fun to do. And I also, so that was all my animal experience. And then for my other experience, I also have my own swimming business, teaching kids how to swim. So I did that in the summers when I was off of school. So that was also something I could talk about and put on my BIF and interview that would set me apart from the other applicants. And I also did extracurriculars like basketball. I played competitive basketball throughout high school, and I was part of my high school music band. So being part of like a community and a team also helped in those aspects as well.
I see we have a follow-up question in the chat from Veronica that says, who did you list as a validator for your own business, Caitlin?
So for the validator, I did go through a course for it to be a certified entrepreneur. So I went through like a summer company program where there was mentors and who taught us how to start our own business. So I listed them.
I see there's a hand raised. I don't know if we want to address them before I go.
Nicole, we can address them after just to make things go a little bit smoother,
Sure.
I think, or whatever you want.
No, you're the boss here, no problem. So as I mentioned, I did get dairy cow experience, and that was actually after I didn't get accepted the first time. So after I didn't get accepted the first time, I kind of looked at my BIF and saw where there were rooms for improvement. So prior to that, I had small animal experience from different clinics, as well as experience with poultry at Poultry Club through the University of Guelph, which I highly recommend. I don't know if they're running hands-on experience because of COVID at this time, but I also worked at somewhere called Positively Pets, where I worked with exotic animals too, and children, which I'm not trying to say they're animals. I'm saying that working with a range of people of different ages is very helpful, because as a vet, you're talking to a wide range of demographics as well. And I also work with Niagara Dog Rescue, so they're great. And I had some hospital experience, like human hospital, which was cool because there are other clinical experiences, and professional settings just with people. And so when I didn't get accepted the first time, I actually added the large animal and the wildlife experience at a wildlife center on my application so that it's more well-rounded. So in the event you don't get accepted, of course, we don't want that to be the case. Although it was quite difficult for me, as how can you not get your hopes up when you finally get an interview to the school you really want to get admitted to? In a way, it's a really good growing experience, and just having, like, looking back, I don't think I would have had those experiences if I did get in the first time. So just try and take experiences like that with stride and use it as an opportunity for personal growth. And in hindsight, I wouldn't have changed anything. And just in the extracurricular section, I also have some different clubs, academic clubs I was involved with on campus, as well as the University of Guelph Woodwinds Ensemble. So it was also kind of like band as well. So anything like that, even if you think this is not going to contribute to my BIF, just try and look again at those CASPer qualities and see that anything really could be contributed to your success as a veterinarian in some way, shape, or form. So don't underestimate the experiences you have.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you everybody for going through your BIFs. That's like never something that we've like done before, so I feel like that's really beneficial just to see the wide range. And Miriam has her hand up, so we can go over to you, Miriam.
Is there like a limit on how many things you can add on for BIF?
So I think there is, for veterinary experience, I forget how many you could put. I think it was 4 or 5 under vet. I don't know. But I know that there was a limit for some of the things. Sorry, I don't remember actual numbers, but I do remember reading something about it. But basically pick like the ones that you know contributed the most to learning about yourself and what gave you the most experience and where you learned things that are the most valuable to you as a future professional. I didn't have that problem because I had like not as much experience as everybody else, it seems, but it doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, like it doesn't matter the hours, like Elizabeth said, it just matters about like what you learned and what you took from it and how you can kind of put that from paper into words and characteristics and stuff like that. So don't stress about competing against anybody else for that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It just matters what you learned and that it shaped you to be a future veterinarian. So hopefully that helps. I kind of went around the question there, but.
Thank you, Emily. So we have a question that was asked previously by Veronica, which is, one second. What were your reasons for wanting to be a vet? Yeah, if you're comfortable, if it's not too personal of a question.
I can go first. I have just always known that I wanted to be a vet. Ever since I was a kid, I grew up in a house like full of animals. So just being around animals always made me happy. I found that if I had a bad day and I came home to see my cats, like they would always be the positive in my life. So I kind of I always knew I wanted to be in the medical field, but I was never certain about human medicine. I knew that veterinary medicine was probably like the route for me, but I unfortunately had an older sister that got really sick and she passed away. So going through that, like moment in my life, like that kind of taught me that that wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a doctor for humans, but I still wanted to make change in people's lives that was positive. So I know that's something sad to say, but we like all go through things like that, and it does, like, you'll never have a linear path to get to where you want to be. And I'm just grateful that I am where I am now, but definitely like thinking about where you want to be is hard because you never really know where you're going to end up. But I think that if you believe that something's right for you, you got to go out and get the experience for it. So whether that's trying to volunteer for something or maybe even adopting a dog, and like if you're comfortable with that level of responsibility, like maybe take it up a notch, like join the Niagara Dog Rescue or stuff like that, right? Like you just gotta you learn as you go, as you grow up. I don't know how old you guys all are, but I'm 24. I'm sure some of you guys are younger than me, but you kind of learn as you go. I know it's kind of not what you want to hear, but I'm probably rambling again. So does anyone else want to go and take over?
Yeah, I can take over a little bit because I wasn't the same. I didn't know if I wanted to be a vet from like a child. I grew up in a family of like psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors. So it was always kind of like human medicine was like human medicine. And I was always, I'm not sure. I did love animals from a young age. My parents always joked that when I was like 2 or 3, I told them I wanted to be a naturologist. So I always loved like wildlife, and I was a kid who went and caught frogs and all that jazz. So I did love like animals and everything like that. But I never really was set on being a vet until probably the end of high school, probably grade 11 or 12, that I kind of was like, you know what, this is a good path. This is what I'm interested in. As much as I love animals, I also really love problem solving and like puzzles and that kind of thing. So medicine, it was always of high interest to me because I like the problem solving side of it as well. And the fact that animals are thrown in there is great.
Am I good to go, Caitlin? Okay. Again, I also really liked animals growing up and had pets throughout my childhood. So again, I always had an affinity for animals. And as I went through high school, I also learned that I really loved the sciences as well. And it wasn't until the end of high school as well, I really confirmed my interest in vet med through volunteering, as I was always worried if it would be too gory or something like that when it came to surgery. But upon experience, I revealed to myself that I was very interested in it. And the more experience I got, I realized the profession has such a great balance of intellect and heart. There's like the scientific side, and like Hannah was saying, like the really problem solving intellectual side of things. And then there's the heart of dealing with the people and the animals and the great cases that work out that are really rewarding, and the not so good cases where you have to really support the clients and everything. So I just think it's so interesting as every day is different and it's really well rounded. So for all of those reasons, that's why I wanted to be a vet.
Okay, yeah. And for me, I didn't know I wanted to be a vet from a young age either. I only decided on veterinary medicine like after high school when I started my undergrad at Guelph. And then when I got exposed to like the more experiences at Guelph, so like by volunteering at OVC, by helping out with Full Watch and getting experience with large animals, is what really helped solidify my passion for veterinary medicine, because I did always love animals growing up. I never had a dog or a cat or any domestic animal. I only had like fish, maybe a rabbit, but nothing like no dog, no cat. So getting my experience at different veterinary clinics and being around animals all day is what I really liked about veterinary medicine and what first got me interested in it. And then by gaining that experience at different clinics and seeing how each one is unique in its own way is what I really enjoyed about it. And seeing how each veterinarian as well has their own method and unique way of treating animals is something I really enjoyed watching and learning about. And being a vet is, you're signing up for lifelong learning. So if you like learning and being in school and studying, then I think veterinary medicine is a good career for you guys.
Thank you, everyone. Those were some awesome answers. Definitely wasn't expecting a few, not gonna lie, but that was really cool to hear. I just wanted to let our members know that it is getting slightly late, so please, if you have any other questions for our wonderful achievers, post them pretty soonish, I'd say. But other than that, I think, Tula, is there any other questions you have to ask specifically for the achievers?
I think that about covers it on my end.
I think, actually, I am so sorry. I think I missed a question, if I remember correct. Yes, okay. So, Shadi asks, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do you have any strategies to stay calm before and during the interview? I'm sure you like all of you answered this like a little bit as you went, but like, I mean, I'll bring it back and see if there was anything like specific you'd like to say again.
I think that across like all of us, just being over prepared or preparing early is kind of like the key thing. It just helps you feel less nervous come time of the interview because you kind of feel like you did lots of different things to be ready for different questions or scenarios, and the prep courses or the like Future Me MD, going over stuff with those people honestly really helps because you're talking to people who were in your shoes less than a year ago. So listening to them kind of talk about how they were also feeling nervous, it almost takes away those nerves, if that makes sense, because you know it's normal. So that's kind of what I found was a key thing. And honestly, when you're in the interview, you do not think about nerves anymore. Like you're just purely focusing on what the interviewers are asking you and answering your questions. You don't have time to really think about your nerves just because it is quite a quick interview. I think ours was 15 minutes and the year before it was 10. So just having like that limited time to answer things, you kind of just don't have time to focus on nerves, which is really awesome.
Yeah, and I think one other thing in regards to nervousness that helped for me was making sure that I kind of got rid of any other external factors. So for me, like not sitting on a swivel chair so I couldn't swivel. Like for Emily, I also did it, making sure my hair was tied back so I wasn't like constantly worried about my bangs in my face. Like Nicole said, setting out your clothes the night before, having your computer set up. Like I think all those things generally just like make you feel a little bit better on the day of the interview, because then you're already like ready to go. You don't have to worry about anything else except like how you're going to perform.
Yeah, and for me, I made sure that my station and everything was prepared like a few days in advance. So my setup was I made sure my laptop was like at eye level, and then I had like 3 different lights angled on my face. So make sure you have good lighting. That's really important. And then interview wise, for like answering the questions, I would just try to like take a deep breath before I answered each question. And if you forget the question, that's totally fine. Just you can ask the interviewer to like repeat the question for you. So don't freak out if you totally blank and don't remember what was asked. It is better to ask them what the question was again and to repeat it, opposed to just guess and answer something completely different. So yeah, and then just focus on like the 3 or 5 main things that you want to get across to your interviewers, and just make that like the sole like meat of your answers, and just always go back to that and keep that in the back of your mind.
Also, something that I did was I actually practiced in my actual interview space. So when the interview came, it kind of just felt like another practice session. And of course, you know it's not practice, but just kind of having that experience in that same place just made it more natural, or some sort of placebo effect of muscle memory, just for my confidence and reassurance sake. And also, if you need more time to think before answering a question or need a moment to breathe, you can just ask for a moment to think, or another strategy to kind of mix it up so it's not so repetitive is if you have a glass of water, just like take a sip before you answer the question, just to kind of keep yourself grounded before beginning.
All right, so it's 8:15 and you all have answered so many of our questions so well. So I think this is a good spot to end for tonight. I wanted to thank everyone for coming, and I really wanted to thank you for our CASPer Achievers for coming out today. This was like an incredible experience. You guys shared so much with us, and we really, really appreciate it because I'm sure this helped a lot of people kind of get more of a solid idea of what they wanted or of what they have to do to prepare for the application and also to prepare for the BIF, etc. You guys were amazing. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the help. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming to this event. Really, like, this was, at least for me, this was an incredible experience. And I'm definitely going to be thinking about this a lot over the next few months as I prepare. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys. You guys will all do great.
Thank you. Good luck.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
You.
Oh.